On behalf of Wisconsin Technical College System President, Dr. Morna Foy, welcome to a series of recorded informational presentations regarding the opportunities to apply with the Wisconsin Technical College System for funding authorized under the Federal Adult Education and Family Literacy Act. I am Mark Johnson, Education Director for Adult Education with the Wisconsin Technical College System, and I'm joined by Tu-Ya Kang, who is the Grant Manager for the Wisconsin Technical College System. In order to provide information on these opportunities, staff from the WTCS have provided 9 separately recorded sections. You will see the 9 sections here. Notice that sections 1, 2, 3, and 9 apply to all of the grant categories and to all applications. Those grant categories are now underlined and include comprehensive regional service, integrated English literacy and civics education, adult corrections education and reentry services, targeted focus, and innovation in integrated education and training. This informational recording is section 1, which includes the content seen here. Note, as this presentation proceeds, there will be occasional references to the actual grant guidelines, which is the authoritative source of information and which are seen here. These are the actual guidelines. There's about 40 some pages of guidelines and forms and attachments and very detailed information. You can see in the table of contents, again, very detailed information to help you with making an application. Note that during this presentation, we'll be using several acronyms. One of those acronyms is WTCS for the Wisconsin Technical College System, and another is AEFLA for the Adult Ed and Family Literacy Act. In the first pages of the guidelines, there's introductory information about the organizations who are eligible to apply for AEFLA funding. In addition, there's information about the need for applicants to provide evidence of demonstrated effectiveness in key aspects of adult education and English language learning. Federal regulations governing AEFLA clarify the 10 organization types that you see here on this screen. This information is also available on page 9 of the guidelines. WTCS is responsible for determining if any application from an eligible provider of demonstrated effectiveness in providing adult education and literacy services. We need to establish whether there's evidence of demonstrated effectiveness. According to the guidance from the federal government, applicants must provide information regarding their work in reading, writing, math, and/or English language acquisition, and their documented outcomes for participants related to employment, attainment of a GED or HSED, transition to post-secondary education and training. If you are a new applicant to AEFLA, there are instructions in the guidelines and a form called Form 5 that you will use for showing your demonstrated effectiveness. If you've been an existing grantee under AEFLA, we will have your data and we'll make a determination on your demonstrated effectiveness. Now I'd like to talk just a little bit about the umbrella legislation for AEFLA and how it fits with partners. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, is landmark legislation that is the umbrella legislation over 4 different titles that you see here. The legislation received strong bipartisan support and was signed in 2014. There are 4 core titles that make up WIOA, and notice that AEFLA is Title II of that legislation. In terms of Wisconsin, at the state level for WIOA, there's a state plan that the 4 core programs have worked together to design that describe the state's overall workforce development strategy. And then at the regional level in Wisconsin, WIOA promotes alignment of workforce development and education programs with regional economic development strategies. In Wisconsin, this is done through the state's workforce development areas. Wisconsin has 11 workforce development areas, each overseen by a regional workforce development board. Each of these regions also has at least one or more job centers, which offer physical access to many of the services in the different titles. Pages 3 through 5 of the guidelines offer more information about WIOA. Now I'd like to turn back to the primary focus of this presentation. Title II of WIOA, which as we saw earlier, is the Adult Ed and Family Literacy Act. AEFLA is designed to give adults the opportunity to improve their skills through high-quality research-based programs and activities. The following activities are outlined in Title II of WIOA. And as you look at the guidelines, you'll see specific information on Section 231 and what it includes in terms of adult education and English language learning. Section 243, which is a section specifically focused on integrated English literacy and civics education. And Section 225, which is focused on corrections education and education of institutionalized individuals. Corrections education is a national and state focus, and certainly is also a focus of the AEFLA guidelines with a dedicated funding category. More information about these three sections and the purposes of AEFLA is available on pages 3 through 6 of the guidelines. In awarding grants to eligible providers, by federal law, the Wisconsin Technical College system must consider 13 considerations while scoring applications, including such things as how responsive the application is to local workforce needs that are identified in local workforce plans, including how well the applicant serves individuals in the community who have low levels of literacy and/or are English language learners, how well the eligible provider is able to work with individuals with disabilities, etc. These 13 considerations are important to review. Note that they are included in the application's scoring rubric. Now I'll turn things over to Tuya Kang, who will carry on the next section of this presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mark. So as shared, my name is Tuya Kang, and I am the grant manager at the Wisconsin Technical College System. I want to start off by sharing that we have $6,263,879 that's available for competitive grants for fiscal year 2022. This amount will be distributed across 5 different AEFL grant categories, and depending on which grant category or categories you plan to apply for, we encourage that you please review the appropriate sections in the grant guidelines and also review the recordings for those grant categories as needed. The entire grant award period will be from July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2025. Eligible providers who apply for and receive the grant in fiscal year 22, which starts on July 1st, 2021, will receive it for 4 years. However, awarded applicants must submit a continuation application annually after the initial grant award to continue grant funding. They must also maintain full compliance with all the grant requirements. Awarded applicants will then receive annual awards for July 1st to June 30th timeframe during the duration of the grant. The first thing I would like to share regarding the terms and conditions of the AEFL grants are that the completion and submission of an application for AEFL grant funds does not commit WTCS to make an offer or an award. Funding for this award is contingent on funding from the grantors, which is the U.S. Department of Education or the federal government. Please make sure to review pages 7 through 8 of the AEFL grant guidelines for detailed information regarding the complete terms and conditions of grant awards. Next, I'm going to dive into talking about grant suspension and termination. Within the terms and condition, there is language about suspension and termination. This slide will focus on grant suspension. The first type of grant suspension is WTCS initiated suspension. Here, WTCS staff will provide written notice of suspension to the recipient and the recipient's president or executive director. The notice will state the reason or reasons for the suspension, any corrective action required of the grant recipient, and the effective date of suspension. Suspensions shall remain in effect until the grant recipient has taken action satisfactory to resolve the reason or reasons for the suspension. No funds shall be spent or reimbursed during the suspension. WTCS staff will provide written notice of the end of the suspension to the recipient. The second type of grant suspension is grant recipient initiated suspension. If a grant recipient needs to temporarily suspend a grant, written notice must immediately be sent to the grant managers and grants at wtcsystem.edu. The notice will state the reasons for the suspension together with an effective date and an anticipated grant reinstatement date, if applicable. Any unspent funds, including encumbrances where the service date has not yet occurred, will not be reimbursed by WTCS. Any expended funds not reimbursed by the suspension date must be requested within 30 days after the suspension. Note that cases of grant suspension may affect future awards to the grant recipient. In this slide, I will be discussing grant termination. The first type of grant termination is WTCS initiated termination. If a grant does not come into compliance, if a suspended grant does not come into compliance, the grant will be terminated by WTCS. WTCS staff will provide written notice of the termination to the recipient. The notice will state the reasons for the termination and an effective date. Any unspent funds, including encumbrances where the service date has not yet occurred, will not be reimbursed by WTCS. Any expended funds not reimbursed by the termination date must be requested within 30 days after the termination date. The second type of grant termination is grant recipient initiated termination. If a grant recipient intends to terminate a grant, written notice must be immediately sent to the grant managers and grants at wtcsystem.edu. The notice will state the reasons for the termination together with an effective date. Any unspent funds, including encumbrances where the service date has not yet occurred, will not be reimbursed by WTCS. Any expended funds not reimbursed by the termination date must be requested within 30 days after the termination date. Note that cases of grant termination may affect future awards to the grant recipient. Within this slide, I want to share some reminders and information about auditing. Grantees that spend more than $750,000 annually in federal awards are required to have a single audit performed. Grantees shall submit the audited financial report to the Wisconsin Technical College System no later than 6 months following the end of each fiscal year. The audit firm shall retain working copies and related reports pertaining to audits of WTCS grantees for a minimum of 3 years after the date of the issue of the report. At any time before the final payment and up to 4 years after, the Wisconsin Technical College System or federal government shall have access to review and or audit the grantee's expenditure statements and source documentation. WTCS has a multi-tier process for monitoring and evaluating grant-funded providers. This means that if a grantee fails to meet grant expectations and reporting requirements, reduction of grant funds and or elimination of grant funds in the future is possible. Please make sure to review the decline reporting, triennial reporting, and other relevant requirements noted on page 12 of the grant guidelines. I will now turn it over back to Mark to discuss grant eligibility, to discuss eligible individuals.
Thank you, Tuya. A couple more key concepts of AEFLA, and first it will be talking about eligible individuals. The term eligible individual in Wisconsin means an individual who has attained 18 years of age, is not enrolled or required to be enrolled in secondary school under state law, and one of these three things is basic skills deficient and or does not have a secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent. Third is an English language learner. Those are the eligible individuals who may be served with funding under AEFLA. We already reviewed eligible providers very quickly, but just a reminder who the eligible providers are. It's important to note that the eligible providers receiving these funds must be located in Wisconsin and must be using these funds to provide services to eligible individuals living in Wisconsin. And it bears repeating that these funds may only be used to serve individuals 18 years old or older who are not enrolled or required to be enrolled in traditional secondary school under Wisconsin law. AEFLA funds may not be used to serve students in the traditional K-12 system or who are of compulsory education age. More information about eligible individuals and about eligible providers is available on pages 9 and 10 of the guidelines. The responsibilities of eligible providers include, as you see here, aligning appropriately with your local Workforce Development Board plan, which includes coordinating your activities with the other WIOA partners, those other titles that we looked at, identifying yourself as a member of the American Job Center Network as required by the federal law. There is a requirement to negotiate contributions, small contributions to the American Job Center infrastructure costs. Eligible providers are responsible to participate in a career pathways approach in order to provide students access to employment and training services. And eligible providers have a responsibility to provide coordination of the three components that are required in an integrated education and training program, which is a key requirement under AEFLA. Integration education and training programs include adult education and literacy activities combined with workforce preparation activities and with workforce occupational training. Other responsibilities of eligible providers, obviously to develop processes to recruit, orient, enroll, assess, instruct, and retain students in your educational program. Some of the things this includes are administering personal assessments and career assessments to students, developing in collaboration with each adult learner a personal education plan, referring students to appropriate supportive services. And one note here, it's important to note that providers are strongly encouraged to collect Social Security numbers from eligible individuals for the purpose of tracking accountability measures under WIOA. However, eligibility to participate in any of the programs under WIOA is not contingent on the individual providing a Social Security number. But in order for awardees to meet their accountability goals, that we need to do some matching using Social Security numbers with Department of Workforce Development, et cetera. And so we do strongly encourage applicants to collect Social Security numbers. Other responsibilities of eligible providers, providing basic skills, ABE and ELL instruction that incorporates multiple modalities, including the use of face-to-face, online, distance, virtual, hybrid, and or self-directed instruction, following the WTCS Adult Ed and ELL curriculum standards, adhering to the pre and post assessment policy that provides guidance on the required administration of pre and post-test locators and tests, etc. Another responsibility is to help develop students' digital literacy skills. And a final responsibility is to employ qualified staff and faculty to perform the key responsibilities of the grant. This concludes the first of the 9 presentations on the AEFLA guidelines. If you would like more information, you see our contact information here. And on behalf of Tuya and myself, thank you very much for your attention to this presentation.